Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and CA has rolled out with the High Elf roster. This is pretty cool, very fleshed out, awesome to see this coming along, and I think someone was posting online that this makes for, what was it in total, I believe 800 total units created up to this point, so that's pretty impressive. So yeah, the huge variety in Warhammer is still shining through. So let's dive into the roster. They're going to start off with the two legendary lords. These were pretty obvious. TYRION, of course, being early on confirmed, and then TECLIS was staring us in the face in the trailer itself. So these guys are not really a big surprise, but they give us a little bit more detail. So TYRION and TECLIS are going to be twins. TYRION is going to be focused more on melee, whereas TECLIS is going to be more magic focused. TYRION, they say here, is going to be more of a duelist, so he's very useful against high value single targets with a lot of armor piercing. And in terms of his steed options, he can kind of be on foot, be on a normal steed, and then his highest ranked steed is actually going to be Malhandir, which is going to be an elven steed that is extremely fast. And yet still maintains the bonuses of being barded, so a very tanky steed that is very quick and fast. TECLIS, on the other hand, also has a similar steed. This one's called the barded ITHILMAR steed. This one is pretty fast, has the same kind of gist as TYRION, in the sense that it's fast but armored, but in this case it's not quite as fast as his twins. That being said, for magic, they didn't talk too much about the different lores of magic that are accessible to him, but they did talk briefly about a special potion that he has, the Potion of Caro, and this one basically allows you to trade out for his magical abilities. So you take a debuff to the Winds of Recharge rate, and in exchange you get to make your lord tankier. So that's nice if you get kind of focused down and you need to use that in a pinch, or if you're going to want to get stuck in it a little bit. So that's kind of cool. Next they move on to the main lords, not the legendary ones, but kind of the high tier lords. So it's going to be a prince and a princess. So these two are going to be coming to the battlefield with both kind of similar parallel mounts in this case. Although the prince here gets foot, barded ITHILMAR steed, great eagle, and sun dragon, whereas the princess gets foot, elven steed, great eagle, moon dragon, and star dragon. So a little bit of differentiation in there. Oh, sorry, and the prince does get the star dragon as well. So the princess are going to be these generic lords. The prince comes with a sword and a shield. He's a bit of a tankier option, whereas the princess comes with a sword and a bow, so more lightly armored. And yeah, so you get a little bit of trade-off there. And on the campaign map, you're going to need a little bit of different political investment in order to unlock these. The more political influence you have, the more you can unlock more powerful princes or princesses. So you can imagine there'll be various tiers of these guys. And so I kind of like that mechanic on the campaign. It's one of the things they emphasize as being the underlying mechanics for the High Elves. So next, after that, we can take a look at some of the other lords. So they have not just the lords, but now they move on to the heroes. And the heroes, here they stay. You get the Loremaster of HOETH. So here's a hero option, both mage and melee. Hero with the power of a lord, one of the strongest made to date, comes with a great sword, no mount options available. And then the mage is a caster hero. And then your noble after that is going to be your melee hero. He comes with a halberd, and he can get a mount as an eagle. So that's pretty cool. He can also get the ITHILMAR chariot and barded ITHILMAR steed. We'll talk about those later as actual units. But yeah, this melee hero gets a lot of different mounting options, which is cool. So that's kind of it for the legendary lords and heroes. So the three tiers there, people are pointing out that in terms of the lords, it's kind of interesting that you only get a prince and a princess that are both focused on melee and range, but you don't really have a lord tier caster, which is kind of interesting, although they did state that the Loremaster of HOETH is going to be pushing it in terms of his abilities and be pretty strong. So yeah, so he may be kind of technically classified a hero, but may have the strength of a lord when it comes to magic. Next we can get into the infantry. So talking generally about melee infantry, they talk about the fact that on the tabletop there was this always strikes first ability, but CA has not decided to implement that. Instead what they've gone is something more akin to martial prowess. And what that is as long as you keep your unit health above 50%, you'll get a nice buff to your missile defense and or melee defense, sorry, and charge defense. So kind of similar to how with the lizard men, you want to keep yourself above 50%. Going below that will start to trigger you to rampage and lose control of your units. A similar kind of teeter-totter effect happens with the high elves, but in this case, if you stay above the 50% health mark, you get awesome stats to hold the line. So that's kind of a cool, unique mechanic. Now onto the units themselves. So they're going to start off here. For basic infantry, they do announce that there's actually kind of a special infantry unit called the Gate Guard, and it's a garrison-only unit. I assume it's only going to be spawned at those special gate tiles on the campaign map. They did say that you can't select this guy. What you cannot, I should emphasize, when it comes to custom battles and whatnot. So he probably just appears at the gate-specific battles. But anyways, that's a unit that isn't technically on the roster, but will be available. So yeah, campaign only. Now onto the units themselves. So they're going to start off here with the Spearmen. These come with the Tower Shield, and they say that they're pretty rock solid units, the lowest tier, but still pretty strong. Not quite sure how they're going to tackle. So for instance, the Eternal Guard of the Wood Elves, I'm not quite sure how they stack up. I would imagine these High Elf Spearmen are going to be a little bit lower than that, but they do still say they're pretty rock solid. So you can imagine you can spam them and have a pretty steady main line. After that, the tier 2 guys are going to be the White Lions of Trace. These guys were moved to be a little bit lower than the Swordmasters of Hoeth, which we'll be speaking about shortly. But the White Lions of Trace here come with the Lion Cloak, which gives them missile resistance, and they have a great axe. And they come with a Forest Strider. I'm not quite sure what that is. I think it allows you to have bonuses in the woods. The next unit is going to be the Swordmaster of Hoeth. So these guys were moved up to tier 3. And these guys come with a great sword, and they're actually pretty fast. There's no deflection skill implemented thus far, but they said they may think about implementing that in the future. So yeah, after that, the next tier up is going to be the Phoenix Guard. So these guys are very prolific, very strong. They come with a halberd. See, I did say that they're comparable to Chosen, a little bit weaker than them in terms of, I think, how hard they hit, but they can take much more blows and are far tankier. So that's an interesting little trade-off. A lot of the High Elves here abilities being about holding the line, so that's going to make them an interesting faction. So that's it for the melee infantry. Next we can move into missile infantry. So first tier is going to be the archers. These guys come with longbows. They're the highest range basic missile infantry, at least in the early game. And then after that you can get archers with light armor. So they're the same as the above tier, but obviously with a little bit of armor tacked on. The next tier up is going to be the LOTHERN Sea Guard, and these have two variants, one that's just the Sea Guard and the other one that's with shields. So these guys are interesting. They kind of trade out a little bit of their weapons. So they come with a backup spear, which is pretty cool, so they'll be able to deal pretty okay in melee. And as a result of having a spear, they still have their bow, but they don't end up having the extreme range of the lower tier archers. So this is a cool, unique weapon combination because it means that they won't necessarily be as susceptible to cavalry charges, which is really cool because they can fend for their own. There was a similar unit, I believe it was the Cimbri Bowwomen in Rome 2, which had that ability as well. They could whip out spears and fend for themselves pretty handily. And then of course, if you want to have archers that can be even more resilient, give them the shield upgrade, and that'll be very low micro units that can be pretty resilient and can stick out for themselves. So that's it for the missile units. After that, we can get into the melee cavalry. So first, we're going to start with the lowest tier one, which is going to be the ILLYRIAN Reavers. These guys have Vanguard, and they're the lightest cavalry, and it's actually going to be the only unit with Vanguard in the army. After that, we have the Silver Helms. These guys are heavy knights, faster and more offensive, but they're obviously going to be more expensive. And then after that, you can of course apply another upgrade, which is Silver Helms with shields, same as above, but of course more shielded, and I would assume a little bit slower as a result, but obviously more tanky. So that is kind of it for your lower tier guys, and then once you start to get a little bit heavier, you get to the Dragon Princes. So these are pretty awesome. These are going to be some of your best cavalry when it comes to the High Elves. So these guys are really resistant to physical and fire damage, top 3 best cavalry they say here, and they come with the longest lances in Total War history. So I don't think I've seen images of them just yet, but these guys should be pretty badass. The fact that they're supposed to be the top 3 best cavalry is going to be really a big boon to the High Elf roster, and of course they were known for their cavalry, so that is to be expected. Next for missile cavalry, they have the ILLYRIAN Reavers. Again, these guys are very light, but they come with bows, and yeah, so they're basically the same as what you'd expect from the tabletop. After that, we can move on to artillery. They only have a single artillery piece. This is going to be the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. This is something we saw in the trailer. It was obviously going to be confirmed, but this one is interesting. They gave us that additional detail that it has 2 firing modes. So it can fire spread shot, kind of like shotgun, or focus. So obviously focus is going to be used to tackle single unit entities, whereas wide shot can be used to target infantry as they get close to range and really tear through formations. Multi-shot mode, they say here, fires 13 shots in a spread, while focus fire, while non-focused, it takes down single units as well. So that's kind of interesting, talking about the different abilities. And I really like artillery pieces like that have different modes that can make them more versatile. Next, we can get into some of the chariots that the High Elves have. The first is going to be the TIRANOC chariot. This one has 2 bowmen on the chariot and comes with a REAVER bow from the tabletop. And this one allegedly fires 3 times at very incredible range, lots of ammo, and it still functions as a pretty decent melee chariot. I can see this being brought a lot in multiplayer. We always really need something like this, a very mobile harassy unit like this, but that can charge into melee if need be, that isn't really as flimsy as some of the stuff you might see from the Wood Elves that can only really kite, but when it gets caught it goes down. The High Elves seem to have that same ability to kite but then still stick it in melee, so this is going to be a very cool unit. The next chariot is going to be the ITHILMAR chariot. It is drawn by barded steeds, and so it is as a whole very heavily armored. And it even has spearmen riding on top that do a lot of damage as well to the enemies. So that's pretty cool. So 2 chariots there that are going to fulfill pretty niche roles and are going to be very useful for breaking the line. After that, we can talk about some of the monsters that they have, and these start to get really interesting. So the first one is going to be the FLAMESPYRE Phoenixes. These guys are resistant to magic, and apparently they become stronger if you have high winds of magic. I'm not quite sure how that works. Perhaps your damage resistance is in some way tied to the total magic available on the battlefield. That's an interesting mechanic we haven't seen. And then also they have a cool ability called the Wake of Fire, and that is essentially a big carpet bomb ability that you can pull in, although a comment that I saw online was that it's more easily spammed, so I think it's on cooldown, you can use it kind of over and over again. I believe the Wake of Fire is something that I had seen on when we were playing in the game, and I have to say the effect for it is absolutely amazing. It looks straight up like a bomber coming in and laying down napalm. It is insane. The amount of damage it can do and the real length of this Wake of Fire is pretty incredible. It seemed to go on for, if you were to stretch out an entire unit kind of as wide as it could be, it was at least 6 or 7 units long. It kind of seemed like the Wind of Death in terms of length. So that was very impressive to me. There's also another interesting ability here for this Phoenix, is that the unit can also get reborn if the health drops too low. So there's a 50-50 chance that maybe it'll just die, but it might get reborn, which is a very interesting mechanic. Although it's not going to get reborn at full strength, it's going to be somewhat, I don't know, still damaged, but that is a very interesting mechanic. I'm interested to see how that'll work, and it'll obviously result in a lot of kind of roll the dice clutch situations where perhaps if this is your last unit, oh man, things could go either way depending on how that 50-50 roll ends up. Next is another Phoenix. So instead of the FLAMESPYRE, the second one is going to be the FROSTHEART. So this one doesn't have the Wake of Fire ability, but instead it has a little bit more tankiness, and it actually has a nice debuff where it slows units around it, and its Blizzard Aura will debuff the offensive capabilities of units. So this guy's really cool to keep behind on kind of around your main line. He can keep, you know, if your High Elves are early on in the battle, like we mentioned that effect before, where they have more defense and charge defense, plus this Blizzard aura, which will reduce the amount of incoming damage, your main line can hold out forever. And again, they do say that the effects are presumably going to scale with the Winds of Magic. Next, we can move on to the Great Eagle, which they say is pretty similar to what we saw for the Wood Elves. Could even be identical, and it's going to be a cheaper flying monster that you can bring. Now, getting away from cheap flying monsters, we're going to move on to the final tier of flying monsters, which is going to be the dragons. So the first one is going to be the Sun Dragon. This one is the smallest and youngest. It comes with the Fire Breath ability. And this is actually true of all dragons. They're going back and giving all dragons a breath ability. But in terms of the High Elf dragons, they have 3. Kind of the larger high tier one, the more powerful their breath is. So the Sun Dragon here has Fire Breath, which is kind of more scattered. And then the higher tier you go, the more focused it becomes. So next level up, the Moon Dragon, its breath has not only more damage, but it has more, I guess the cone of fire is a bit more directed, so you can really pick your targets and do more strategic damage. So that's the Moon Dragon. And then lastly, the Star Dragon. They say this is the best dragon in the game. It is also the most expensive. Its flame attack is going to be so focused that it may even border on kind of like a beam attack. And they say here it will cut through armor like butter. So that is really cool. Very exciting stuff. This roster looks freaking awesome. I'm excited to see these models in play. Again, like I said, I did get to play a little bit of them, but I didn't get to see the full roster or the kind of Phoenix ability or the different chariots. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff. And I really like the 50% health mechanic, the way they're doing that for the different factions. Again, for the Lizardmen, below 50% health, you start to be triggered into Rampage, where you lose control. For the High Elves, once you go under 50%, you're going to lose your bonuses in terms of how well you can hold the line. And it has me intrigued for how it's going to work out for the other factions. What's it going to be for the Dark Elves? What's it going to be for the unnamed, so far, Skaven faction? But yeah, this is all very cool. So that's it for this overview. I expect we'll hear more in the future, but this is it for my overview. Stay tuned for additional news to drop pretty soon. See you in the next one. Peace out.